I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like this so-called new trend isn't really a new trend. And I think even when I looked at some of the comments, they did actually say the same thing. And to be quite honest, is it anything that's that new? I feel like maybe the levels at which...
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. He is also a man who may include jumping to conclusions to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B, and I am here to talk about money. The thing that people don't like discussing whenever it comes to relationships and sex and hooking up and dating is money. Because money is a very tricky subject. But you can only run away from it for so long, and it has been a while since I have discussed money or had a money-related episode, and this is just one of them. But while the main topic may sound like the typical money episode types that I might have, I do feel that whatever it is that I'm supposed to discuss is something that many young people might feel affects them in the dating market in some way or the other. For some, it's the fact that, they're making good enough money and it's meaning that they have fewer options. For others, it's the fact that they're not really making as much money and they are still trying out despite that supposedly being a situation where they shouldn't be having options. But I do intend on getting on each of them and discussing them in full length. And hopefully you like what it is that you're listening to, of which if you like it, if you don't like it, if you have a different form of feedback, and should you want to suggest a potential topic and or guest I should have on the podcast, then the DMs are always open. The social media links are in the description below or aside or above, wherever it is that the descriptions usually are on whichever app you're using. And as always, should you feel lazy or should you not want to go and look at the links that are usually in the description, then you can obviously listen all the way till the end, and I usually give the social media right at the end of every episode. Now, with all of that said, I should get into the main topic of this episode, which involves a man telling a woman that she is not in fact looking for a husband, she is looking for a wife because of her preferences. But before I can get into any of that, I want to talk about something that I'm not gonna say is particularly new, but the term for it is very, very interesting. Now, while I was on IG a couple of weeks back, I stumbled across a particularly interesting video where a woman was talking about the concept of financial catfishing. Now, if you think that there's something complicated or very interesting about the idea of financial catfishing, well, I don't know what to tell you, because it sounds new, but it isn't. It's basically the concept of you showing a life of luxury or financial stability, but in reality, that's not really the case. What is actually the case is the fact that you are living on a ton of debt that you may not be able to sustain, but you are trying to look for a mate and you are trying to put up this image that you are doing particularly well financially. Now, I have the video of this explained in detail, so I'm just gonna let it play. So without further ado...
Financial catfishing is the new Gen Z and millennial dating trend. So let's talk about it. You go on an app and you meet someone who seems great. They have a nice flat, a decent car, and they take you to nice restaurants. Then, 3 months into the relationship, you realize everything is built on debt. Their credit cards are maxed out, the car is on finance they can't actually afford, and they're about to lose their flat entirely. Financial catfishing isn't about lying about your salary or your job title. It's about performing a lifestyle you absolutely cannot sustain over time. And it's happening everywhere right now. The Instagram economy has made looking wealthy more important than actual financial security. The scariest part is that they genuinely believe it's an investment in themselves, but it's not an investment at all. It's a house of cards that collapses the moment real life requires actual money.
Okay, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like this so-called new trend isn't really a new trend. And I think even when I looked at some of the comments, they did actually say the same thing. And to be quite honest, is it anything that's that new? I feel like maybe the levels at which you could say millennials and Gen Zs are doing it is probably new, but this is something that's been done for such a long time. Like, there's people that have fallen for Nigerian guys, okay, not necessarily Nigerian guys, but have fallen for other guys and these babes are usually like, oh my goodness, he's such a generous, sweet, kind, caring man. Then all of a sudden they realize that this is someone that stays in a 2-bedroom flat with 6 of his homies, and apparently they scam people, or like they're broke or some shit like that. Like, this isn't the first time we've heard of stuff like this. I think this is the first time we're actually putting a name to it that specifically defines what it is that it is. And truth of the matter is, I've spoken about this many times before, and it's part of the reason why for a very long time I actually believed that the era of the date is basically over and people should stop putting emphasis on going out on dates. And I can remember the first time I was bringing this up, it was when I was trying to push for the idea of Netflix and chill replacing the date. And the justification behind it was, as at now, you can basically fake everything that you are trying to show on a date just to get someone. And usually at that point now, that's when like the babe feels like they've been duped. But the truth of it is, you decided to give the chance to the guy because you saw him displaying all of these things. But the whole idea of scrapping the date aside, because, you know, I did refine my thoughts on it a little later. When I look at this, I don't see it as a dating trend. I don't see it as a mistake that people are doing. I feel like this is more of a reaction to the reality that people are going through right now. I've spoken extensively over the past 2 years about how there's a lot of young people right now that are in the position where they feel like they're too broke to date. And it is actually a tough position. Now, considering that people in the West do tend to get a bunch of debt money fairly easily, and, you know, granted, even here in Kenya, we do tend to get some amount of debt money particularly easily, I do feel like it is something that people can actually pull off. Now, granted, for the most part, a lot of people in this country are living in and through some form of debt. I remember, I think the figure was like 73% or some shit like that are living through some form of debt. And this isn't young people, this is just Kenyans in general. Like, a shit ton of us seem to be living through some form of debt. So when you look at the idea of having a car that's on like a debt payment that you're paying off, I don't think that entirely means that you are financially catfishing someone. But when it gets to a point where someone is literally borrowing left, right, and center so that they can keep up that lifestyle, it can give the impression that you are financially catfishing someone. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that aren't in the best position financially to take care of the opposite sex or to basically do a lot of the dating that's going on. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of guys are resorting to stuff like this just so that they can bag a babe. Because you can be broke, but it doesn't mean that you won't feel the need to be loved or feel the need to have someone that you can call your partner and, you know, feel affection from them, or even just the sex. Like, it's not like just because you're a dude who's broke that you wouldn't want any of those. So if some guys want to get it through any and all means and they do resort to this form of catfishing, then unfortunately it's the reality that we have right now. Now, I'm not saying that it's good or that it's something that you should practice. Of course, you know, avoid it and be as financially responsible as you can. But at the end of the day, like, when I hear of stuff like this happening, it just shows me that there's a lot of young people that are struggling financially, and this is impacting dating on a level that is now becoming a problem because people are now trying to find short-term coping mechanisms to a problem that is in and of itself affecting dating as a whole. But then again, I feel like this discussion does require quite a bit more insight and, you know, a much broader discussion base with just more than one person. So maybe in one of these future episodes, I may have someone and we can have this entire discussion. But for now, I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like we are getting to a point where we may need to have to start re-looking at the idea of what it is that a man is supposed to bring to a relationship. And the reason I say that is because I have discussed multiple times how we are at a point where there's more women that are making more money than ever before, and they are becoming way more accomplished at a much faster rate than a lot of the young men are. actually, there's fewer men that are going to university and even pursuing further education past your typical degree or diploma in university as opposed to women. And so, as a result of this, there's a possibility that there's going to be more women making more money and are trying to date guys that just aren't at that level. But this is the same society that says a man's role is to provide. So, what happens if a guy isn't making enough or isn't making as much as the woman or more, but the woman is still interested in being in the dating market and finding a potential mate? You could even argue like this guy. Like, what exactly happens? So, given that I do have these discussions from time to time, I did find it particularly interesting when this bit actually did become a conversation topic on the It's Related I Promise podcast, or IRIP, with Jules Ha, Noni, and Sharon Mashira, where they had two guys there who were Bright Gameli, if I'm not wrong, and a guy called Des, and they were busy discussing at some point the idea of dating a partner that makes less than you and you're a woman, and how that affects the relationship. Now, I did listen to the entire podcast. I went ahead, watched the entire thing, listened to it, and it is a particularly interesting episode. You should go and listen to it. But there was a clip that ended up being taken and put on IG where Sharon Mashira was asked if she would be okay dating a guy that made less than her. And her remarks fueled something that Des said, which I found to be particularly interesting. Now, I do want to get into my thoughts on it, but before I can do that, let me first let the clip play. So, without further ado...
Sharon, would you date a man that's making less than you?
I used to think I wouldn't, but again, I don't know where I've gotten to in my life. I'm very fluid with things like that. I think if he is someone that I respect and I feel like they have a lot of ambition and they're kind and we get on really well, I would work towards encouraging them.
That's what ambition. What Sharon just described.
Yeah.
That's a wife. That potential, I would support you. You are the rock. You are the pillar. You are the male in that relationship.
Shouldn't you want those? Okay, I get what you're saying. But shouldn't you want those things in a partner?
Let me tell you. First of all, you shouldn't be. I don't think there's a huge disparity in the way even women, just the way you've stated it, see social economic status.
Yeah.
Say, for instance, let's throw out a number, $1 million bob. Making $1 million bob a month. What's the first thing a guy does? He's like, hey, okay. He buys a few toys or whatever.
Yeah.
And then next thing he was like, I want to start a family.
Yeah.
I want to get a wife and kids. I want to share. When a woman makes $1 million bob a month, what did you just say? I don't need a man. I don't need this. I don't need that. You're not even there to provide?
Yeah. No, I don't think men want to share with one woman. They want to share with the women. They want to share across.
Yeah, the way he talks. Why can't you ask us, the women, if we earn $1 million, but stop telling us that we want this, we want this. Sharon is here, I'm here. If I have $1 million bob a month, it doesn't mean I don't want. I want a man regardless.
Okay. Particularly interesting thoughts there. Those from Sharon and also those from Des. And the last lady was Jules. So they all gave particularly interesting thoughts there. And I did want to get into them. More so what it is that Sharon said and what it is that Des said. Because those two actually did bring up something that I have spoken about quite a bit, but I feel like people don't entirely understand why exactly I say what it is that I say. Now, why did Sharon change her resolve recently? As far as my opinion is concerned and as far as whatever assumptions I have, I could go around it a bunch of different ways, but the long and short of it is it's about options and it's about increasing the number of options that she has. And I'm not saying this as like judge, jury, and executioner and everything, and like I know her life and I know her stories and everything, but what I can say for a fact is Sharon should be early to mid 30s. And at least by the way she was speaking and the way she seemed to carry herself as far as that conversation was concerned, it seems like she makes a particularly good income from whatever ventures she's in. Whether it's the agency she has, whether it's, like the online side of things, like whatever it is that she's doing, she makes a particularly good income such that she can sustain herself fairly comfortably, at least as far as the way she kind of carried herself during that entire thing. So by that alone, like actually, even though you were to just take the age bit alone, she does not have as many dating options as a lot of other women that are much younger than her. Reason being, most of the guys that are in their early to mid 30s, actually we can go with even call it 33 to around 40, maybe if you want to push it, call it even 45. Most of those guys are already taken, and those that aren't taken are for a very high likelihood probably divorced already, or they have a kid on the side. So just from age alone, the chunk of guys that she'd have probably found in the dating pool have already been reduced drastically because a good chunk of them are already taken. So not unless if she wants to go for a guy that's divorced, a guy who's got a kid or two and has probably left the baby mama, or maybe if she wants to stretch it, a married guy, the chances of her getting a single guy that has no kids, that hasn't been married before, is pretty low. And a lot of those guys that are single, no kids, not married before, and are within those age brackets, they either have an issue or they were probably forced to, take up some responsibility that took up a bunch of years. But even then, those are very few and far between. And I'm saying all of this just based off of age alone. The moment you throw in income, that pool goes down even smaller because most of the men that are making very good incomes tend to be in certain positions of leadership. Most of the men that are usually in positions of leadership are usually taken. Like, they will usually either have a long-term relationship that's been going on, they have settled down and are about to get married if they haven't already gotten married, or they've been married for a bunch of years. Okay, so for most of these guys, they are already taken. The single ones that are making good money, are within that age bracket, and are in some position of leadership, have so many options, and considering that most of them aren't used to that much female attention, are probably going to enjoy the bit where they fuck around quite a bit. Even though they get a girlfriend, some of them will definitely continue to fuck around quite a bit, which I don't think she wants. Okay, so that automatically puts her in this position where there's such a tiny percentile of guys that if you throw in those two metrics alone, and you could even throw in the bit where she's a very Christian lady, she's very staunch about her faith, and you throw that in there, and it is a very frustratingly low percentage of guys that could be in the dating market that would basically function as potential mates for her to go and meet. And the fact that there are few, and most of them are pretty far between, means that it is incredibly harder for her to play that game. So the best way to increase the number of options for her is basically to become a little bit more lenient in some of those metrics. Now, the Christian one, I didn't even include it all that much, but it's either she becomes a little bit more lenient on age, which, especially considering this part of the world, is particularly hard on a social and cultural level, or she becomes particularly lenient on income. Now, the leniency doesn't have to mean that, she can accept a guy that makes barely any money and, she wants to upgrade the dude, but rather a guy that makes a little less than she does, anywhere from like 20 to probably even 50%. Or if the guy makes a fraction of her income, it shouldn't be anything that's like, say, less than like her making 2 times more than what the guy is making. So in that case, it now becomes a matter of whatever it is that the two of us will do together, whatever it is that I do, is it something that's well within your financial capability to do? Because if it's a strain, then it becomes a problem. But if she's making sufficiently enough that it's not too big of a problem, and half of that is still a good chunk of change, so, like let's even use like a ballpark estimate of like, call it 700 G's. So let's say the guy makes 350, then maybe a bunch of the stuff that she'll want to do on a leisure day is probably stuff that is probably within his financial wheelhouse, so he can probably manage that. But the biggest problem with saying that you're a little bit more fluid, the way she said it, is that people assume that if you're making 500 now, you're willing to date a guy that's doing 50, which usually isn't the case. Maybe 150, maybe 200, but 50 is a little too far down. So in what she said, I can get entirely why she said what it is that she said. But my issue now came with Dez's remarks, where it's like he was busy saying you're basically trying to get a wife because she's like, I don't mind getting a guy that makes less because I can encourage him, provided he's ambitious, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, Dez's remarks, while they aren't something that is surprising or particularly new in society, they do paint an underlying picture that affects a lot of young people in society today. Now, I've spoken about how a lot of guys are in the position where they feel like they are too broke to date, or, young people just feel like they're too broke to date. And yet it really shouldn't be a money problem. Let's be quite honest. Yes, there are financial issues that can prevent you from dating, but feeling too broke to date shouldn't really be a problem for a lot of people, considering that there's a vast chunk of us that are very, very broke. But when you now bring that part up and you make it seem as though the man is now going to be the wife because he's not the one providing, and she talks about supporting the guy, it does bring up this issue where it's like men are always being looked at as providers, but no one ever wants to hammer down the whole bit where people always like talking about how provision is more than just paying bills. Because every single time you find that people talk about how a man's role is to provide and he should pay bills and he should be like the financial muscle of the family, people oftentimes forget to bring up the discussion of provision goes beyond just paying bills or even paying bills entirely. Because in a lot of ways, you find that men are needed beyond just paying bills. So being a supportive partner and a supportive parent to kids, and also the emotional and psychological provision where you give them satisfaction that can go beyond the money. So when you find a scenario where a guy is making money, but the wife or the girlfriend is making so much more than them, oftentimes you find that people will try to belittle the man because, he's not like the sole provider, or his babe is definitely like sitting on him or anything, or he deserves disrespect. Yet the truth of it is, people will always talk about how men need to do more than just pay bills because, we're not just ATM cards. But at the same time, people are like, oh no, a man's role is to provide, which I personally find quite sad and quite annoying, which is why I will always say, like, especially with the way things are going, we can't continue just looking at it as men are supposed to pay bills. Paying bills is an adult thing. It's not just a man thing today. When we have both genders who are working class, making good money, and more so women are making more money than ever before, maybe we need to stop holding on to the whole provision thing from a monetary perspective and just slapping it on men entirely. Maybe, just maybe, if we opened it up, we could find that men can be more useful in more ways than just paying bills. Honestly, that is the thing that I am trying to say. People need to stop looking at it as men are just supposed to be paying bills, because the more we have people doing this, the more you'll have situations like the one I mentioned earlier, financial catfishing, and also there will be more people that will not be dating because they do not feel like they are financially ready enough to be a provider. And to kind of conclude all of this, what I am trying to say is, depending on your situation, for you ladies, getting a guy with more money or less income than you will definitely be an option. You can choose to date a guy that makes more than you or that makes less than you, and that's entirely up to you. The question is, are you willing to keep the option small by dating someone that makes more than you, or are you willing to widen things so that you can possibly get a mate a lot faster because you don't mind someone that makes a little bit less than you? Because especially given today's current situation and the way stuff is going, there's a high likelihood that women will be out earning men very soon. Or I could just be chatting a bunch of shit and I'm wrong about this, but either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.